Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, Leanne Hughes.
Woohoo! Thanks for tuning into episode 2 of First Time Facilitator. I really appreciate your support. I'm also interested in hearing what you think about the show, so shoot me an email anytime with your feedback. I'm at firsttimefacilitator@gmail.com or leave a review in iTunes. Let me know if there are specific aspects of facilitation that you'd like to learn more about, or feel free to recommend guests that I can interview on upcoming shows. I met our next guest through another facilitator, and she focuses in on the diversity and inclusion space. I have to say, I think she is one of the most relatable people I've ever met. She has an effortless and natural way of making you feel really great after you chat to her, and I think that's her unique facilitator superpower. So let's hear from her in episode 2. Our guest has worked across a range of industries, including civil construction, iron ore, coal, financial and health, in the areas of organisational change, human resources, learning and development, and human behaviour, coaching and psychology. She's the author of Rules of the Game, Women in the Masculine Industries, and this book provides recommendations on how to achieve success in traditionally male-dominated industries. She's the founder of the Blue Collared Woman, known as BCW, is a treasurer of the Diversity Practitioners Association, as well as an organisational development and leadership coach. Well, you keep very busy. Welcome to the show, Teagan Dowler.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's so great to have you here. So look, our audience may or may not have heard of you. I'm curious to hear a bit about your career journey and what brings you here today.
Yeah, it's a funny one, Leanne. I grew up in a really small country town down in Victoria, and I actually originally wanted to be a nutritionist, funnily enough. So when I was going through school, I then realised the reason I was interested in nutrition was actually all around the psychology. So why did people have certain approaches to food, and I was interested in understanding the relationship and the mental aspects around that. So then led into psychology. Loved learning about psychology, but when I went through psych at uni, it was all about the pathologies. So the new wave of positive psychology was not actually in vogue at that time in university. And as a young 20-year-old, I just thought, that's a heavy industry to go into. You're dealing with the darker side of human nature, and I wanted to have a little bit more life experience before really going into that space. So maybe it's something I'll do later down the track. But I then thought, oh well, what's another avenue? I'll segue the psychology into business, and started looking at organisational behaviour, which then led to a Master's in Human Resource Management. Finished that and thought, well, what industry do I want to go into? At the time, my dad had built a very good career in the mining industry. So I'd been around the culture, I understood it, I liked it for its frankness and its directness, and thought, let's give it a go.
And, wow. Yeah. And did you get to travel to any mine sites around Australia?
I've been to a lot. So WA, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. I think the only states I haven't worked in is Northern Territory and Tassie.
Okay, so your dad had worked in the mining industry.
Correct.
Did he prepare you for that first day out on a mine site?
Prepared is a really interesting word. So it's a very dynamic industry, and your experience, the circumstances that you can find yourself in are varied. I suppose in terms of the preparation aspect, it was an understanding of the culture, and I'd grown up in that environment. So in essence, I was prepared for what to expect. But in terms of some of the unique experiences and circumstances you find yourself in, probably not, which is hard for him to be able to prepare a young female to handle those scenarios when he himself may not have experienced it.
Yeah, that's right. That's really interesting. And we'll talk a bit about diversity later on. So when you're at the mine site, you're working in a HR role?
It's more of a broader strategic piece. So we work mainly with mine leaders in regards to a range of operational discipline aspects. So leadership is one of them. How they look at their planning, their production is another aspect, how they communicate as well. So it's HRE /strategy /operational.
That's fantastic. I guess one of the things I noticed from you is that you have a very natural way of presenting. And I'm wondering if that was honed over the years, and do you sort of reflect back on previous workshops, from years ago and think, what was I doing? Or have you actually just always been that natural and authentic in front of an audience?
That's lovely of you to say. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Very kind. You always do a bit of a self-critical reflection to think, gosh, am I coming across the way I'm hoping I am? I think for me, what has enabled me to be the facilitator I am today, and thank you for the lovely accolades in that, is probably watching other facilitators. And from a very young age, I always got involved in public speaking, and the fear that brings is somewhat addictive in a way, scary up front, but when you're finished, it's really exhilarating. And I quite like that feeling of conquering something that you were nervous about. And it was through watching other facilitators and other speakers and the techniques that they would display and how they would talk, that's what's enabled me to take pieces from that and build my style today.
Fantastic. You talked about having fear. Is that something that you still go through when you deliver workshops?
Yeah, definitely. I think every group I have a little bit of a nervousness in my stomach. Because you don't know the people necessarily. It's a new group of people each time. And with the variety of people that you have, you've got to be on your toes. So for me personally, there's always the feeling of, gosh, will I actually be able to answer? Will I be able to manage the group dynamics effectively? Will they be interested in the content? Or more so, how can I make the content interesting and relevant for them? So yeah, I'm always still nervous.
So yeah, me too as well. I think, you deliver a few workshops, you've got all the materials, 4 or 5 times before, and then it's a new audience, and it throws you back to that, wow, I really need to prepare for this. So what are your strategies when working with groups? And you talked about anticipating, how am I going to manage the group dynamics, or what if they won't really connect to the content? Do you have anything in your back pocket for those experiences?
Yeah, I think what's helped me the most is definitely know your content. And I would suggest knowing your content beyond just what's in your resource guide or what's on the slides or the handouts that you're giving, because the real richness can come through conversations more so than that content. And it's been helpful to be able to tap into external knowledge or external understandings of research or stories or real life application that can help you in the moments where you think, oh gosh, maybe I'm losing them, or maybe they throw a curveball question.
In that moment where someone is asking you a question and you think, I have no idea what to say or how to respond, do you have any strategies for working with that one? Any tools that you can pass on?
My go-to is, that's a great question. What do you think? And then I open it up to the group or the individual. Yeah. And sometimes saying, look, I'm not sure can be very useful as well, because the way I set up my sessions is I'm not the be-all, end-all, I'm not the oracle, I don't have all the information. This is very much a collaborative learning approach where I learn from the participants just as much as I hope that they will learn from me.
Yeah, I like that it's a two-way sort of learning curve. So do you think there is a difference between, I guess, being a facilitator compared to just being a trainer? Are they two different skills, or are they one and the same?
That's a good question. It's actually something I probably haven't thought about, and it might come down to semantics in a way. In my perception of a trainer is very much around, I give information. This is the information, we run through it in a very structured way. For me, the concept of a facilitator is a lot more, as you said, that two-way, give and take. We're all here on the learning journey, to use a cliche.
So in your observation, what are the skills that really defines a good facilitator? You spoke about growing up that you modelled your style and picked really great things from different facilitators. What were those things, and what makes them great?
I can probably speak for myself around my perception of great, because everyone will have a different version of great and certainly a comfort level of what feels great when you're facilitating or what you might observe. And certainly energy is something that is important, and body language aspects. So that very simple concept around openness and engagement, small nuances around how you use your body when you're facilitating and engaging in conversation is very powerful. I also think one of the important aspects as a facilitator is listening, just as much as it is talking and giving information, because we've probably all been in that circumstance where someone's asked a question, or they've made a statement, and you can see the facilitator didn't really get it and move on and give an answer that might not actually align with the person, and that's a risk of turning someone off when that happens. So I think not only the concept of energy, knowing your content, but also very much listening and observing what your people need. And maybe that it's that flexibility aspect as well. So
That's right.
You go in with a mindset of this is how it's going to run, this is what I need to say, but there's been times where you need to go off script because you can see there's a need in your audience, and that's going to give them better value than what you had originally anticipated. So that flexibility, tapping into your knowledge around what you're talking about is really useful.
So flexibility, we need to listen, be adaptable. It sounds like a pretty exhausting profession. So how do you feel at the end of a big training day?
I'm wiped, to be honest. I'll be frank about it. It then makes me think around, geez, am I an extrovert or an introvert? Because they say that when an introvert is being quite energetic, it's exhausting. And gosh, in some of my hardest workshops, which funnily enough have been the diversity and inclusion workshops, which we'll talk about, I've had, after a full day of that, I'll go home and go to bed because I'm so tired of just the process and the mental fatigue around keeping up with a very challenging topic for some participants.
Yeah, as well, and as managing, a big room, you might have, 15 people, and you're really having to project your energy and amplify yourself.
Yep.
I also feel shattered after a day, and I think, is it just because I'm standing up all day? But I think it's all about that sort of room management and always having a plan B, C or D that you could go to. So what is the best advice that you could give someone? So a technical expert or someone that works in HR that sits in that room and thinks, I could actually get up and deliver something, but they don't really have that confidence. What advice could you give to them?
Embrace the fear. That's a mantra that I try and live by. So you sometimes just have to think, what's the worst thing that can happen? So if you have knowledge that is important and someone else will benefit from you sharing. So have confidence in that or faith that you can deliver the content and that you'll do it well. And if you walk away and you think, I could have done that better, that's a great learning opportunity. So really, I think what's the worst thing that can happen, and just go for it.
That's right. The sun will still set and rise the next day.
It's exactly right. Even as a kid, I used to have this weird thing that if I had something scary to do during the day, which was usually school sports or school swimming, I remember waking up in the morning and thinking, next time I'm in bed tonight, it'll all be over. Time is a finite thing, and in a few hours, the scariness will be done. So it's the same concept as an adult.
In the lead up to a workshop, say it's a big speech or like a keynote speech, a workshop with a big client, for example, how much sort of lead up or prep time do you put in? So if it's a 2-hour workshop, do you really have a ratio, or how do you?
It really depends on how comfortable I am with the topic and whether I've done it before, what the client is expecting. It very much depends upon the info I'm delivering.
Tell us a time where things didn't go so well in a training workshop. What happened, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, look, it was actually quite recently when I was delivering an inclusive leadership workshop, and as I alluded to before, it can be a topic that's quite confronting for people because we start talking about concepts such as self and identity and how our identities lead to different outcomes, such as the identities of others leads to different outcomes for them. And we are in a time at the moment where a lot of organisations are having these conversations, which previously have been more social, broader conversations, and then they are now coming into the workplace and putting additional pressures on leaders. And one of the leaders in these workshops was having a difficult time being able to not understand the concept, but it was misaligning with his existing value set. And what had happened was one of the other participants had said something which had upset the other participant. And it was about lunchtime, I think, when this one participant came to me and said, look, Teagan, I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to leave. And I thought, oh my gosh, oh no, what have I done? Immediately I went to, what have I done? I failed. I haven't been good enough in this. And so there was this little conversation in my head going, just be calm, listen, don't overreact. And so I started asking him questions to understand what was going on. And we talked around, his discomfort with what the other person had said, and I didn't challenge him in that moment for his desire to leave. I gently asked him to think about it, maybe go for a walk around, cool down a little bit, go have a drink, decide if he wants to come back. He did do that, and he said, no, I still want to leave. And I said, that's fine, completely understand. So he went, and I thought, oh dear, that's terrible. I've never had anyone walk out of a training session before. And so went back to the group, carried on. They were all fine. I explained, that we all need to be respectful about what we're saying in a group forum, and finished the session off. That night, he actually called me back. So he'd sought out my personal number, and he actually called me at about 7 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh gosh, oh no, what's happened here? Is he completely upset? And what was really lovely is that he actually said, I've had to think about it, and I understand now what you were talking about, and I probably didn't need to leave, but I did at the time, and I just want to let you know that it wasn't anything you did, and blah, blah, blah. So that was a really interesting experience, because as a facilitator, you're always conscious of delivering value to each participant, and value is a different thing for each person. And I felt that I'd failed for this individual at the time. And then you're also conscious around your brand as a facilitator as well, and being able to make sure that you're delivering what an organisation is wanting you to deliver, or a team or a manager, whoever it is. And I guess the thing that I learnt from that experience was, in a way, you've got to make sure as a facilitator that you are managing all those different needs of the group as much as you can. But if you find that at the end of the day you can't, for whatever reason, that's okay too. And you're not going to please everyone all the time. And I suppose if you come from as a position of integrity for yourself, and you know that you've done all that you can do, and if you reflect and realise, oh, I could have done that better, then that's a learning. That's all you can really do in those stages.
That's really good advice. I had a similar situation, and I mulled over it all evening. I was thinking, what could I have done better? And I sort of went through the similar process as you, and asked a few questions, or let's have a break. And it sort of does come down to personal accountability and being respectful. We'll move on to the topic of diversity. What compelled you to write your book, The Rules of the Game? And what's the response been to the book?
Yeah. Rules of the Game, Women in the Masculine Industries was written, I think it was about 2 years ago now, I think, from memory, or 18 months ago. And it came from the desire to share the stories and share them in a truthful manner. So when I first joined the industry, there was not a huge focus on diversity. There was a few women in mining, women in construction groups and whatnot, but they seemed quite external to organisations. Organisations would send women off, but they weren't really integrated into how we do business. I started actually the Blue Collared Woman, or the BCW, as a blog. And it began very much around me just sharing experiences of myself and others, and some strategies that we've all used to try and work our way through it. And it started to get popularity, and I thought, well, how can we reach more people, and how can we really give a handy resource for people in the industry and women to learn from other women, but also for men to understand the experiences of women in an unfiltered way. And so I started the writing process, and it took about 2.5 years to collate all the interviews and the research, and many weekends spent on the computer. But I wanted to write it just to really help other women. And when I was telling people that I was writing this book, one of my mentors actually said, don't do it. They actually told me not to release it because they were very worried that it would isolate me from the industry and cast me as a troublemaker. So,
which is completely unlike you, Teagan. It's absolutely not your brand, troublemaker.
Some people might say so. Who knows? Probably those closest to me.
But it is a really disruptive book, and I've really enjoyed reading it. I found the steps very actionable, and I think because you set it up by talking to real people working out on site, for me, very useful, new to the mining industry, really had no idea. And going through that, it was just lovely to see I guess, some practical solutions and how to navigate your way through it.
Oh, great. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's really sort of the focus of the audience, was women who were new to the industry, young, coming in perhaps maybe, or those that had changed from one industry to another, because there are some subtle nuances in the traditionally masculine industries culturally. And coming in with eyes open and learning from the experiences of other women is really helpful. It puts you on a few steps ahead, really, to be able to be successful.
It's like, I've got this secret book, I know exactly what I need to do, but you don't share that with anyone. But yeah, I know what to do in this situation.
Awesome.
So
That's
really
great.
useful. What have there been, you spoke about diversity 10 years ago and how people in roles were external to companies, and now we see a lot of diversity advisors, and it's a real focus as part of KPIs and business strategies. On the ground, have you seen much of a change in terms of cultures in those industries?
Yeah, I would say yes. The mere fact that we are talking about it in industry is a really big thing. Even numbers, it's different. So being able to walk into a workplace and see a woman out in the workshop, or even driving trucks and operating machinery now, it's changed. It's no longer the rarity. It's more common to start seeing women in those roles. So a lot has changed, very much. And in fact, today I was just talking with a leader, and she was explaining that she's got 2 workshops, that one has about 40% diversity, one has 10%, different locations. And she said it's so evident when you walk into those workplaces. There's a different vibe, there's a different culture, people are more receptive to different ideas. It's changing. It really is.
That's so encouraging to hear. What do you think the greatest opportunities are in the diversity space for, say, the next 1 to 3 years? Where do you think we can grow? I'm talking about Australian industries, yeah.
Yeah, I really think it's important that we don't forget the conversation about everyone in the workplace. So a lot of organisations, we're really focused on a couple of key diversity metrics, whether it be our women, whether it be our ATSI group, whether it's a disability group. It doesn't, where at the moment we're focusing on smaller subsets or characteristics. And whilst that is important and it's a good way to start, absolutely. What I am finding now, though, is that, and in fact it was a quote someone this week said to me, is by doing that we're actually creating exclusion for the majority of our employees. And when you think about our workplaces, the majority of our workplaces are males. And so it's really important that in the conversation around diversity and inclusion, that we very much have a conversation around how is inclusion beneficial and incorporates the male population in our workplaces.
Wow, so those conversations that you're talking about, being inclusive, how does BCW help clients or sites or projects embrace that? Is it through workshops, coaching, a variety of mediums? Yeah, how do you sort of share that?
Great, all of the above. Yeah. So we do a range of things, from helping organisations set strategy through to diversity and inclusion audits. We do inclusive leadership workshops. We do coaching. There's a range of, different services and support that we can offer, really depending on where an organisation is at in terms of their maturity along the D&I curve.
Do you hear a lot of companies saying, we're not ready for this yet? And if so, what's your response to that?
Good question. I would say 2 years ago might have had a few companies in that space. Now most organisations realise that they have to be in the game. Yeah, because society is changing. The talent pool that they'll be looking for is also highly competitive as well. So if they're not seen to be an employer who is really open and inclusive in their workplace, they will get left behind of talent. And there's actually a great organisation called Diversity Careers, DCC, who actually screen employers on their ability to be open, particularly for women and female supportive work environments. But in general, those organisations are also very good around a whole inclusive characteristics. So you can actually go onto that website and see which employers have been endorsed.
We'll put those in the show notes. Interestingly, with the increase of technology, we find a lot of companies are relying on online learning and technology to really spread a message. I know that you do some remote, well, that's something that you're building at BCW, remote and online courses. Do you think it will replace the face-to-face experience, complement it? Where do you think it sits in terms of learning and embedding culture change?
I may be unpopular on this one, perhaps. My answer is I hope not, to be honest, because of the feedback that I'm currently getting, certainly from the industries that I'm working in, is that online just does not hit the mark, particularly with your operational space. So having the ability to whip out, say, a smartphone or log in via a link on a website, that works for some employees. And so I do think there's a space for online training. But in terms of being able to hit others, you've got to always consider what's the best medium for being able to connect, impart information, and also create a shift. I think that face-to-face space is ideal. It's irreplaceable. But there is a space sometimes when you might need to do online training. So it's around understanding what's the outcome that you want to achieve from that training and that content you want to impart, and then deciding what medium's going to be best.
And I think the value in running these workshops is not only the delivery, but I guess each participant sharing their information and their stories. Yeah. So look, Teagan, you wear so many hats. I know you're quite busy, and we've spoken about another venture that you're getting into. What actually, what keeps you driven, and how do you wake up in the morning and balance all these different roles that you have?
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and think I'm not balancing these roles very well, to be honest. And I have to remind myself to make sure that I'm not spreading myself too thin. That's my fear. But really, you've got to find your passion. And so for me, diversity and inclusion has been this burning passion deep within me that I want to see change. So it's more than just a job. For me, I love it, and I'm motivated intrinsically by what we are trying to achieve. So that helps immensely. But yeah, you got to watch you don't put too much on the load. Too many hats on at once, they'll all fall off.
I bet there's so many exciting opportunities waiting for you, and it's hard to say no sometimes.
Thank you. I'm trying to learn how to in a way that doesn't disappoint anyone or lead me to run myself down.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you?
They can jump on online. So my website is www.thebcw.com.au, or they can jump onto the social media channels. So I'm on Facebook, The Blue Collared Woman, or Instagram. They can just search The BCW.
Perfect. We've loved hearing your tips and tricks and strategies for becoming a first-time facilitator. And thank you so much again.
It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Leanne.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to First Time Facilitator. If you liked the episode, please share it with your mates or subscribe to the podcast feed in iTunes. Till next time,